Alright everybody, welcome back to episode 8 of Stranger Things Season 1 here on the Weekend Binge. And this is the one it's all been leading up to. Quite literally, because it's the season finale. The Upside Down. Episode 8. Did I say episode 7 earlier? Because I did mean 8. I have no idea. I'm a little bit loopy. Regardless. This episode... I'm usually pretty disjointed anyway. You all are pretty used to that. I'm going to be even more so because of how intense this episode is, and also just because of all the different directions. Like, we went to basically one solid storyline for a little bit. Like, everyone was together for that brief period of time in the previous episode, and now everyone's branched back out again. So I'm going to do my best to cover everything that just really stood out to me, and it should be clear at this point, if you've watched the other episodes, that I cover basically everything in the episodes because everything about these episodes are amazing to me. So we'll just put it that way. Yeah, I'm gonna have to rethink how I do this weekend binge thing, I think. Anyway, let's get started with the cold open. And when it comes to the kids, I mean, this is one of those few times where, like, they don't really serve, like, they're on screen for a few moments, but they don't really serve much of a purpose. All we're shown is that Mike is super anxious, super restless. He notices that Nancy and Jonathan are gone. And he's just like, what do we do? And, you know, Lucas and Dustin are the level-headed ones. They said, well, we're supposed to stay here and make sure Eleven's okay. Like, we're supposed to protect her. And Mike's just like, dah! You know, because he's upset. But, yeah, moving on from them, I'm gonna hold on to talk about the big ones here in just a moment. But we get a bit of Nancy and Jonathan going over to Jonathan and Joyce's house, or to the buyer's house. And the only way to put it really is that they're preparing for war. And to put it that way is not really very far off. It's like, yes, it's two people versus one monster, but it's a monster that has killed numerous people. Like, no one, they don't even know if it can be hurt at this point. It's like everyone has run away. It has killed numerous people. They have no idea if it can actually be hurt. They know they assume it's a predator. They're going to try and lure it with the blood. And that's all they got. But regardless, it's like they have some guns. They have the bear traps. They have gasoline. They're prepared for war. And boy, howdy does it come to them. At least in some amount. But then finally, as far as the cold open goes, like, probably just the most standout portion of it is Joyce and Hop in the lab after they've been captured and being interrogated. Joyce is confronted by Dr. Brenner, aka Papa, who I just prefer to call him Papa because I, for whatever reason, can never remember his last name. But he tries to play this, like, you know, I care card. It's like, you know, I want to help you. It's like, even though I didn't talk about it, just sort of the same thing that he tried to pull, or that he did pull on Ted and Karen. And, like, you know, he's wanting to help Mike out, you know, help their son out. It's like, you know, and he's in great danger. And Joyce is just like, go to hell. You have let my son stay in there. You haven't even tried to get him out. You made us think he was dead, or you tried to make us think he was dead. They had a funeral. You know, they went through all of this, and now he wants her to trust him? Go to hell, in her own words. And it's just another one of those moments where it's when you see Joyce just going off on someone, you're just like, yeah! Well, really, when you see anyone go off on someone in this show, because like 90% of the time, they deserve it when someone is going off. But, like, aside from that, then we see Hop, who, let's just say the folks at the lab aren't very pleased with him. They're not exactly happy that he returned after he already broke in once. So, yeah, they're just... It's fair to say they're torturing him. Taking the taser to him, like, basically after everything he says. Which, oh, what was the line? It's like they're tasering him because he said something. And then one of the guys in the suit says, "Tell us what you know." I'm sorry. Did I stutter? Everything. And it's like Hop... At this point, it's clear that Hop just has absolutely zero, actually probably less than that. It's like less than 0 fucks to give. And like he's just telling us, like, I know everything. He tells them everything he knows. He knows everything they've been doing, that they had a big boo-boo that they're trying to cover up. To the point where, like, that same guy who just didn't believe him a moment ago says, "Who are you with?" No one. No one. Hop is with Hop. More literally, he's with Joyce in this situation, but yeah, he's not with anyone. No one is pulling the strings on him. And I love it because it opens up this short sequence where even I, as much as I love Hop, what he says makes me question. It's like, what's going on here? Why is he saying these things? And what ends up happening is he strikes a deal with, more specifically with Brenner, but also I guess just the people with the lab in general. And it's that, you tell me how to get in there. You give us what we need to get in there and get the kid, and I'll tell you where the girl is. But what makes me... He says this line, and it's like, it hurts a little bit because it seems something... I don't know if it's out of character, but it hurts to hear him say it. But when he says to Brenner, where is it? Daggone it. Oh, I'll tell you where your little science experiment is. And again, just coming from him in that moment, it's just like, whoa, Hop, where is this coming from? Why are you saying something like that? Because, again, it just doesn't seem like something he would say. At least in my opinion. But I understand why afterward, which I'll explain. But after that, Brenner, whether you want to say he takes the bait or, he agrees to the deal, or as Hop puts it, they came to an agreement. They're led down to where the gate is, given their hazmat suits. He gets a gun, I don't know if it's a Uzi exactly, but an automatic rifle. And the cold open ends with them entering the void. More accurately, entering the upside down. And it's not, at least for me on second viewing, like that scene, it wasn't as intense, but I noticed just this great sense of foreboding. Because there's not just like this sudden sting, and it's like, and cut to black and then credits. Whether it's, how they've done at the end of some episodes or at the end of the cold opens. But no, it's like they enter, and where the gate, well, whatever it is that's covering it, was sort of opened up by them getting through, just slowly forms back together and closes, essentially identifying that they are in there. We don't know if they'll get back out. At least that's the vibe that it gives off. But, again, after the cold open, to focus on Hop and Joyce, they spend the majority of this episode really just wandering around. Not much happens to them. It's like where they're going around in the Upside Down, it is by and large very empty, very devoid of life. Up until a point where, you know, they do happen to find something. But one of the most important points for when we're focusing on those two is the flashbacks that Hop has to his daughter Sarah. His daughter Sarah, and to a degree also his ex-wife, who I don't think she even really gets more than maybe a line or two, and it's not even direct, it's just kind of like almost background noise when she says something. But we see just this short version of what goes from Hop playing with his daughter and them just being super happy and playful, and that is literally the most we have seen him smile this entire show. Like, he has not smiled as big as he does in that first scene with his daughter. Like, he hasn't smiled that big in any other part of the show so far. And then just this look of concern, because we don't even get to see, like, you know, the build-up, like, see her growing up with him. No, we see this moment where it's obvious, like, it's the beginning of the end for Sarah at that point. Which is, you know, appropriate because this episode is the beginning of the end of this season at the very least. And it's just, while they're playing, all of a sudden she just can't breathe. And it's, you know, it's obvious there's something wrong. And then the next time we see her, it's after they find the remains of, or we see her in a flashback, it's after they find the remains of Castle Byers. And Hop sees Sarah's stuffed tiger, like the stuffed tiger that she had with her in the hospital. And it's at this point he's reading a book to her, and he's smiling. It's not a happy smile. It's this smile of, you know, it's like he's with his daughter and he's as happy as he can be at that point. But it's clear she's dying. It's like, you know, she, for all intents and purposes, I mean, they definitely give off the portrayal that she has cancer. It's like, you know, she has no hair and she's in her hospital gown. And then immediately after, I was sorry, it's elements of this episode are just really kind of hard to talk about. But like right after that, after he finishes reading to her, it immediately cuts to him in the stairwell of what I assume is the hospital, just crying. And it's for me at least hard to tell. It's like, you know, is that crying, is that the point at which, oh, no, never mind, I'm sorry, I was getting confused. It's like he's crying because she is dying. There's nothing most likely that they can do to prevent it, to keep it from happening. It's like she is sick. And because of him crying there in the stairway, it gives off this feeling of hopelessness. As much as he loves her and as much as he smiles for her when he's with her, it's clear that it's killing him. And I think one of the saddest parts, and we don't get much information about the we don't get any information about the relationship between Hop and his wife during that time. But he's crying by himself. And while I personally, it's like, as someone with depression, I've often had a lot of times where, I just want to go off and be by myself, to let loose, just let the tears flow. But it feels like there's this implication of him being alone, and there already being just this, the tie that binds Hop to his wife, it's like it's already being severed. It's like, because he's left to not grieve at that point, but to just try and process all of this on his own. And again, it's just one scene. It's just one scene, but I feel like that one scene says a lot. Sorry. But then again, it's like, they continue wandering through. They go through an upside down version of the town. Again, it's just desolate, dark. There's decay everywhere. And then they come upon the public library. And the library is just a house of horrors inside. They see the remains of various victims of the Demogorgon. And then they find Will. And when you see him, because of the stuff that we have seen, like when we see Barb's remains, it's like there's this weird tendril worm thing like sticking out of her mouth. And when we see Will, it's like he's technically standing up, but one of those things is in his mouth. And like they break Will free and, tear it out, and Hop shoots it. It's kind of hard to tell whether or not he actually did shoot it or not, because it's just kind of wiggling around and we see bullet holes around it. I don't know. But the scene that follows, where it's like Will's not breathing. They don't know if he's dead or not, but they try. They try their absolute best to revive him, doing CPR. And while they're doing that, Hop is getting, or we see the flashbacks of Hop's daughter. Like the doctors are around her. She's going into, I don't know if it's cardiac arrest, but she's dying. And they're doing everything they can to, bring her back. And it reaches a point where, in trying to revive Will, both Joyce and Hop, it's like they haven't given up, but they're both getting hysterical. Joyce is just begging Will to come back. And Hop, he's gone from, just the normal, presses for CPR to just pounding on Will's chest, which, part of me technically wants to say is like, that's it's not going to work. They'll just break his ribs more than, how CPR already is potentially prone to, but it's the emotion of the moment that comes through. And as Will comes to, it's like he finally coughs. He finally comes to, it's like, he's alive. In the flashback, we see the moment that Hop's daughter flatlines. We are back. Alright, sorry about that. I got very, very emotional. Maybe I should have saved that part for the closer to the end of the video, but oh well. There we go. Anyway, moving away from them for now, let's focus on Nancy and Jonathan. And they do what Nancy thought might work in order to lure a predator. They draw blood, so both Jonathan and Nancy cut their hands. And then who should appear knocking on the door to the house but Steve? A strangely hysterical Steve, considering he doesn't know anything that's going on. But it's like, he's just like, "Hey! Jonathan! I just want to talk, man!" And it's like, again, it seems kind of strange because I don't really see why Steve is seemingly being so hysterical, or maybe he's just like energized. But when Nancy opens the door, it's just like, it's clear that Steve is trying to make things right. It's like he doesn't know what he needs to do. He doesn't know what he can do. At that point, he doesn't say it, but you can see it portrayed in his face. It's like, he doesn't even know if he deserves forgiveness, but he still wants to try and make things right. And then he notices, the cut hand and everything that's in the house, and he's just like, what the hell's going on? And then the Demogorgon appears. And as, just as overly excited as Nancy and Jonathan are, just trying to be ready to fight it when it appears, poor Steve, dude. It's like he walked into one of the worst possible situations ever. Like, he walks in, wants to apologize to Jonathan, finds that Nancy and Jonathan have spread gasoline around, they've cut their hands, Jonathan has a bat with gigantic nails sticking out of it. And then a big faceless monster whose face turns into a giant flower vagina appears. It's a bad day for Steve. But they run to the bedroom where they're waiting on the creature to hit the bear trap, but then it disappears. It disappears. And in the process there, while they were trying to get Steve to go, Nancy even pulls before the Demogorgon appears, she pulled a gun on him trying to make him go. And I think she even says, I'm doing this to keep you safe, or it's like, this is for your own good, something along those lines. And he's just like, no, what are you doing? What are you doing? He's basically in a state of what the hell is going on for most of that segment. And then Nancy says that you need to leave. And Steve, he's just like, gone. He runs outside to the car. But to his credit, he goes back. And I can't say I would have blamed him if he had run away. Because, again, let's face it, it's a giant faceless monster whose face expands into a giant vagina full of teeth. I'm sorry if that's a little bit too graphic, but anyway, it's kind of what it is. Sorry, I'll shut up about that. But it reappears, the lights go out, it reappears, and Jonathan is thrown off. It actually gets on top of him, and strangely, slowly, it starts to It almost does kind of how villains in Bond movies love to monologue. This thing kind of takes its time and getting closer and closer to Jonathan's face to start devouring him. And Nancy shoots the gun and, oh, unfortunately, it's not effective. And then just not out of nowhere, because we saw Steve, he stopped at his car and he looked back. We don't see him run back to the house, but he shows up, he grabs that spiked bat that had been knocked out of Jonathan's hands, and he wails on that thing, just starts beating the piss out of it. It's awesome. It's like, that's the moment where, for me, Steve went from, okay, I don't hate you anymore, you're kind of okay, I see this can be your redemption arc, to Steve! It's really that simple. I'm easily bought over, I guess you might say. But yeah, at that point, I really like Steve again, and he's kind of awesome. And all three of them are working together to try and take this thing out. It gets into the bear trap, they light the gas, and it gets caught on fire, and then it disappears. I guess technically it might have torn off part of its leg, because the part that was in the bear trap is like kind of sizzling and melting away when they do see it. But yeah, it's just so strange that, like, while it's on fire, it just all of a sudden it disappears. Like, we don't even hear it, like, struggling and ripping its leg out of the trap or anything like that. That was kind of weird for me. But again, it's just, after all that, after unexpectedly 3 of them went to war against this thing, it escapes. Which brings us to the last group that's left in this entire ordeal. The kids. And as I mentioned before, Mike is just super anxious. He's worried about 11. He's worried about everything. And to alleviate the situation, though, Dustin does find the chocolate pudding that the cafeteria lady apparently has been hoarding. Which I'll admit, I've never seen chocolate pudding in, like, these aluminum tins. I've always seen them in like plastic containers, like the Jell-O containers. Now, that's just me. Maybe back in the 80s it was more common, but I don't know. Every time I've seen those tins of chocolate pudding, it's just kind of like, that doesn't sound very appetizing. But again, that's just me. But we get this adorable little scene between Mike and 11. And Mike starts to come out about what we've basically known the entire season at this point. It's like he struggles to tell 11 that he likes her. And then in a moment that, I don't know, some may find controversial or something, but from my perspective is sweet, is like he leans forward and gives her a quick kiss. Just to, like, to show it's like, okay, he can't say it very well in words, but, he shows in that way that he really likes her. And just we see 11 smile. And I think in that moment it confirms for her that, she's known that Mike cares about her. She knows that the other boys care about her. But for whatever she's able to understand, because again, she hasn't had a lot of normal human interaction until like the few days that this show transpires over. But it's clear that she recognizes that that's something special. And that's something special that Mike just showed to her, emotionally speaking. However, it's at that moment that they arrive. The people from the lab, the government, whatever you want to call them. But they arrive and they start converging in, and 11 is unfortunately still very weak. The boys are like they try to get away, but they're surrounded. They're surrounded by these government agents with guns, and it's clear that they do at the very least hesitate and don't immediately kill the kids, but it's clear that, they won't have an issue with doing that if they need to. And then 11 has one of the most gruesome and amazing moments in the entire show, and that's saying something considering the Demogorgon and what it's done to people. But she comes in, and like the blonde lady that shot Benny, as well as the others around them, like, they start to bleed from their eyes, and just like 11 is just without it seems almost effortless for her at that point, but she destroys an entire room of people who are going to kill her friends, including the bitch who killed Benny, and who the same one who I was worried was going to kill Mr. Clark. Then Papa shows up. And, unfortunately, 11 is too weak at that point to really put up much of a fight. She does defy him. It's like, she calls him bad. And, with what energy she does have, she shows that she is not just going to go along. She is being defiant. And then the Demogorgon shows up there. And, let's just say that not only do the boys have a lot more to worry about at that point, but so do the adults. The adults with all the guns. And those guns don't do squat. But on the plus side, Papa's dead. Unless they didn't technically show him dying, just the Demogorgon jumping on him. But I want to say that pretty much confirms that he's dead. I don't know what they're going to do in the second season of this show, because again, I haven't watched it yet. But for all intents and purposes, Papa's dead. And 11 is just so drained. The boys get her to the classroom, just basically where they try to take their last stand. And Will does everything he can. It's like, he promises 11 that they will keep her safe, that when this is all over, it's like, he can, or she will really be part of their family. His mom will take care of her. Which personally, I think that Joyce would be a great mother for 11, but that's just me. And then one of the big themes of the show, 11 just says, "Promise?" And then the Demogorgon has torn its way through all the big, strong adults with their big, scary guns and enters the classroom. And the boys fight back with the only weapon they have, the wrist rocket. Using the rocks that, they had gathered many episodes ago. And then they get to the rock. I want to say it's the same rock that Mike busted his chin on when the bullies pushed him or tripped him. And there's just this amazing moment of the cinematography is so well done. It's like we get this quick slow down motion of Lucas pulling back the rock and letting it go, and it gets to the point where the rock should hit the Demogorgon, and then it just flies back halfway across half of the room into the wall and chalkboard. And for a split second you're thinking, oh my god, did that actually work? But then obviously we see that 11 is up and using the last, she's already drained. She uses the last bit of energy she has to subdue the creature. And like the makeup art. It's a commendation to I can never remember her name, the girl who plays 11. Commendation to her acting, like her being able to portray the emotions and the feelings that her character is going through at that point, and also the makeup artists, what they were able to do. 11's eyes, like, they look so sunken in and glowing red. It's like it almost looks like, you know, where she's been like bleeding through her nose, it almost looks like blood is actually escaping into her irises at that point. And maybe that's the intention, I don't know. But she's using every last drop of energy she has to subdue that creature. And the last thing that she says after she's saved the boys is, "Goodbye, Mike." And it's... Okay, I'm not going to let myself get too torn up about this part, because I already did earlier. It's again playing on the theme of promises. Friends don't lie, and a promise is something you don't break. And Mike promised 11 what would happen after this was all said and done. But she's the one who has to break the promise. And that last moment where she obliterates the Demogorgon, and then its dust just flies everywhere, and then as the dust settles, she's gone. And at that point, we have no idea what's happened to her. It's like, for all we know, she used up so much of her energy that in destroying the Demogorgon, she destroyed herself. We'll touch on that again here in just a moment, but that's, like, all of that is the climax of the story. Them destroying the Demogorgon, or rather 11 destroying the Demogorgon, 11 disappearing, and Will being revived by Hop and his mom. And then we cut to the rest of the episode, where Will is waking up in the hospital. I guess it is the same night, maybe, because it almost seemed like it would have been taking place like maybe a day or two afterward, but now that I think about it, no, everyone is waiting in the waiting room appropriately, and they're all in the same clothes. But yeah, Will wakes up, and things start to go back to normal in a way. Except for Hop. When he's confirmed that Will is okay, he takes a step outside to light a smoke, and one of those government vehicles, or one of the vehicles from the lab, pulls up. They open the door for him to get in the back, and he drives off. So it's at that moment, you know, it just kind of leaves me thinking, what's happening? What's going on? Is Hop a bad guy now? Is he working with the agents and that makes him a bad guy? It's just all these thoughts going through my head. And then it cuts to Christmas. More specifically, Dungeons and Dragons at Christmas. So we pick up with the boys basically in the same form where they left off, or where we began with them in the first episode, playing Dungeons and Dragons. And the Demogorgon is gone. Now it's the Hydra thing. I don't remember the actual name, but a new big bad monster. And it shows just this adorable bit of character growth. It's like, even though we haven't really seen Will himself grow through the process of the show, we have gotten to experience Dustin, Mike, and Lucas all grow. And like the first thing Lucas says is like, you know, use a fireball. And Dustin, instead of arguing, is like, no, cast protect. He's just like, kill him. Kill the monster. So in a way, that's sort of symbolic of the boys getting over their fear of the monster and including Will's. Like, after what Will's lived through, it's just kind of, even though this is just Dungeons and Dragons, it's just like, yeah, let's do it. Fireball! And I just love the way they did that. And really what we get throughout the rest of this episode is what I said a moment ago. Like, things were going back to normal, and at this point it seems like life is back to normal. Things will never be the same, and a lot has changed. It's like Mike, it's like he keeps staring over to the area where Eleven's blanket fort was. It's like he's thinking about her all the time. Jonathan is like, he just comes over and picks up Will. It's like, he's friends with the family now, and even as him and Will are leaving, Nancy comes out and gives him a Christmas gift. AKA the replacement for the camera that Steve destroyed. And it's just like, things have gone back to normal, but in a lot of ways, they're better. Not always, but some ways. And then, and what was the first time I watched this, a bit of a surprising moment, but it makes total sense for me now. After Nancy gives Jonathan the present, we see her go over to the couch by the Christmas tree where her dad is sleeping, because that's what dads in the 80s did, I guess. Sleep on their recliners. We see that her and Steve are together again and seemingly very happy. And it's like the first time I saw that, I was kind of upset because part of me was hoping that maybe her and Jonathan would actually end up together. But again, after having rewatched the show and seeing how, one, Steve did make decisions to make things better, and then we have an entire month that we don't get to see, but during that time, it's apparent that, he has continued to improve himself, to be a good person. And obviously that's what Nancy sees in him. So good for both of them, in my opinion. I'm happy about how that turned out. But as I said, it's like, things are back to normal, kind of. We see the scene where Will and Jonathan are back at the house, and they're having their Christmas dinner. They're getting ready to sit down and have Christmas dinner, but Will excuses himself to go to the bathroom. Just says, "Oh, I forgot to wash my hands." And what transpires is he coughs up what looks like a small bit of that tendril that had been in his throat in the upside down. So I don't know if it laid eggs in him or what's going on, but I don't know if he actually goes to the upside down for a moment, or if it's in his head in a way, or if maybe at this point he's somehow sort of in between the upside down and the real world. It was like he can't control when that happens. But it goes completely Silent Hill here. It's just like, all of a sudden the entire bathroom is dark and that white snow ash stuff is falling, and it's terrifying, to say the least. And they end the episode with that, with him going back to the table and, looking a bit startled, but, just pretending that everything's okay. And then it fades out with the family, laughing and talking and having Christmas dinner. But the final moment I want to talk about is Hop and what he does. It's like, because he went with the agents. Like, the agents took him away, and then the next time we see him, the station is having their Christmas party, and Hop is just kind of there, he's just like, whatever. And then he goes over and puts some food in a Tupperware, like some of the snacks and everything. He's just like, you think I want to be here? I just came here for the food. Which he's not lying about. He's not lying in that regard. And then we see him go out to somewhere in the woods. And there's this little box with an opening that he opens up and he puts the food in, as well as some Eggos, which obviously heavily implies that this is for 11. And I don't know if it's that he knows 11 is still out there, or if this is sort of a way to try and get her to come back, or it's sort of as a gift. It's hard to say, really, because it doesn't seem like 11 would be in the... Well, if she's anywhere, she would be in the Upside Down, considering what just happened. But I don't know. Maybe it'll be revealed what Hop knows at that point in the next season. I have no clue. But, yeah, that brings us to the end of the episode, the end of the first season. And this episode has gone on almost as long as the actual episode itself, so I apologize for that. But there's so much to talk about with this episode, and there's still a few things to cover in my overall final thoughts of this first season. So for those of you that have toughed it out and watched all of these review videos that I've done for this first season, thank you. Please leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I want to reiterate before, again, we move forward to my final thoughts. This series is an experiment of mine. It's something that I want to make work. It's something that I think could be a lot of fun to do. But I don't know if the format in its current form is something that people will want to watch. I'll discuss this in a completely separate video further, but please do let me know your thoughts on the format of all this. And in addition, obviously, to your thoughts on this episode in general, the season finale of Season 1. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know anything else you loved, anything that you found annoying, and whether or not you disagree with me on certain things. Because, you know, I'm not going to say I'm always right about things. My wife would say I rarely am. Actually, no, she wouldn't. I'm just kidding. Anyway, so we are at the end of the episodes individually, and if you want to go ahead and skip ahead to the final video, click here right now, and we will begin my final thoughts, my final overall thoughts on this season.